Good morning. My voice is a little deep there. All right. If you think you're going to learn everything today, I don't know how to help you. All right? I have spent many hours studying this. Just because I'm a man doesn't mean I know why I do what I do. I have to figure out why I do what I do almost every day. I go through a million processes, a million thoughts in my head just to make one decision. And I have to go like this. I have to push all this other stuff away and say, this is where I'm going to go. Because otherwise, and Tim will tell you this, you're treading water. Because you don't know what to do. And that means you're not doing anything. How many people in here understand men? Raise your hand. We don't have very many young people in here, do we? How many people in here think men are simple? The only people I really saw raise their hand were men. And we are extremely simple. However, there's a caveat to us being simple. Do you guys know what an iceberg is? You know, that thing that floats in water, and the Titanic saw it, but they were still too close to it, even though it was a distance away? Men are like icebergs. You see about 10% of us because that's above the water. The rest of men are below water, the other 90%. And God designed us that way. We need to be able to be anchored in a sea of constant change. We need to be that way so we can weather storms. It gives us the ability to keep our head above the churning chaos all around us. A lot of times, men look like beacons out in the middle of nowhere. But there's so much more to men, and most of that is never explained anymore, talked about, or discussed. So if you want to know what that 90% is that lies below the surface, you're going to get a brief overview today. Because if there's only 10% above it, and it goes down like this, and you're only seeing this 10%, we can only scratch the surface. To do this properly, we could spend, 4 or 5 months talking about each subject. Because first of all, we have to discuss how men think, and then we have to spend most of our time dispelling what other people think of men. And the other thing is, when I'm standing up here, I'm going to be talking using terminology that men understand. Men and women look at words and think about words differently. That's why we have a lot of communication problems. Men are being really smart right now because they're not even moving an inch. They don't want to admit that because it could get them in serious trouble. So what does this unseen 90% consist of? Well, before I get to there, the scripture today, you can get all the information that we are talking about from scripture. Because the Bible is all about relationships. It's all about men and women. acting. So I'm going to put this up here because I didn't get around to making a PowerPoint. And these are just like maybe 10% of the verses that I came across. There were more than that, but it would require a lot more in depth to explain those. And if you can't see them, then you're sitting in the wrong area. However, if you want to know what that is, at the end, I have a handout of exactly what I'm talking about. And you can look them up, and that will be your homework. You will look up these scriptures. You will verify everything I say. And then you will talk to a man. All right. What's the 90% consist of? Well, we got it. Needs. A man has needs. A man has a purpose. A man has responsibility. A man has action. And the man also has oneness. Okay? That's very generic. So what do we mean by a man has needs? Please don't confuse this with wants. Needs and wants are very different. A need is an absolute necessity required for survival and basic functioning, such as food and shelter. A want is a specific desire that improves your quality of life but isn't required to live, like dining out or upgrading to a luxury item. So when we're talking about a man's needs, it's what he needs to survive. He may have that red sports car, but he doesn't need that to survive, and he knows it. That's a want. So let's talk about needs, which is the first thing on the list here. There's no science to this, but this is what I've come up with through my own study and through listening to other people, watching videos, and searching the Bible. I have 5. Can you guess what those 5 needs of a man are? Do you know those 5 needs of a man? Don't worry if you're wrong, because most men don't know. They just act upon it because it's encoded in their DNA. That's how God created us. What are the 5 things that men need to survive? Okay, I didn't think anybody would answer. Respect. Second one is peace. Third one is emotional security. Fourth one is admiration and appreciation. And the last one is a reason to live. Do you guys have any questions about those 5? I'll read them again. Respect, peace, emotional security, admiration, appreciation, a reason to live. Does everybody understand that? That's what I thought. You're afraid, and if you're men, you're like, that sounds right, but I don't exactly know why I think that. And it's because most of the time we're never asked these questions, so we never think about it. We just do, because that's how God made us. I will touch on just 2 of them. If you want to know more detail, I have the handout. Peace. Why does a man need peace? God made men single-minded. He gave us a single focus. Yes, we can do lots of different things, but we are single focus. We are not great multitaskers like you women. We are single focused. We don't usually quit till the job is complete and it's finished. All right? That is our peace. So even if you see us sitting out on the deck or sitting next to a stream not doing anything, we are doing something, and that's our peace. If my wife comes into my office when I'm working from home that day and starts up a conversation, what's happened? My peace is disturbed, it's destroyed. Because now I got to start all over again. And while she comes in, I'm thinking, how long is this going to take? What is this about? And does it have to be discussed now? Now, see, I'm doing work, not necessarily work I like to do, but I'm at peace because I am doing what I'm supposed to do. And she comes in. Once she leaves, I have to restart the whole process, get back in the flow, and be at peace again. Just giving you an example here. Respect. Men thrive on respect. It's what motivates us to do our best. So, if we're not treated with respect, and this goes for other men or women, if they don't treat us with respect, so if a woman or a man doesn't treat me with respect, I am a lot less motivated to do what I'm supposed to do. Because I know they don't care. Because if they respected me, I would know they care. A lack of respect, like I said, kills motivation. So if a man does something and he doesn't do it to your standards and you disrespect what he does, what's he likely to do the next time? He's either not going to do it or he's going to probably do it even worse. Because there's no respect in it. Sounds like it's childish, but actually that's how God created us. Now I'm going to go to reason to live. A man has to have a purpose. And that's what's up here. A man has to have a purpose. You don't believe me? Just open up your Bible. All those men had purpose. Without purpose, a man is directionless. You agree? If you don't, look at today's younger society. They have video games. That's their sole purpose. Okay, I'm overgeneralizing. I know that. Just giving you an idea. For men, don't be shocked about this, it's easier to die than live. Men need to be successful to maintain their self-worth. Now, if you've seen men that seem to be having difficulties in times and so forth, that's not health-related or something like that. It's because they don't have a purpose. Did you know that a man without purpose is more likely to commit suicide? Did you know 80% of suicides are men? This is even though women attempt more suicide. Now, my son's had some funny jokes about that, but we'll let that go. Or actually, what they said is men are just good at what they do. And to be honest with you, if a man's contemplating committing suicide, he's going to work through the plan until the end, until he's sure it's going to work. He's going to work out all the details because he has a purpose, but his purpose is to kill himself. Men have to have purpose. So, what is purpose? Purpose represents a goal, an aim, or a deep-rooted why that guides men's actions and provides them with meaning for life. By nature, by design, the purpose for a man is to be what? There are 5 things. And the Bible touches on all these 5 things. And I don't have all the verses up there for them. But if you read, you'll find them in the Old and New Testament. So under purpose, there are 5 things. What's the 5 things? Does anybody have any idea? Now, women should know, because when they're looking for a mate or to get married, they subconsciously want these 5 things. And it has nothing to do with height, how much money they make, or anything like that. Well, it kind of does, but not really. All right, since you won't tell me. Is he a provider? Would anybody in here date a man that's not a provider? God created women a certain way so that godly women and godly men could match up. A man's purpose is to be a protector. Those are 2 very high things on the list: a provider and a protector. The Bible also says he needs to be a priest, right? He's the one responsible for teaching faith, morality, and spiritual growth. He leads others by example and just not by words alone. All right? Another one is prophet. This should throw you one off. The other one is a man needs to be a prophet as part of his purpose. A wise man who possesses a deep knowledge, insight of things, present and future. A man who others go to for guidance and instruction. Do you see how that relates to a man's purpose? He's a planner. Men who don't have a plan, what happens to them? And don't say retirement, because I'm looking at George and he has a plan, even in retirement. Oh, let him go. I would sleep through it too. Actually, I have. And the last one, a man's purpose is to be an advocate. Anybody know what an advocate is? No? A father, a brother, a friend who stands with and supports others who can't stand up for themselves. So under that purpose, there are 5 things a man has. All right? These give the man purpose. These gives him a reason to live. You can take away 1 or 2 of these, but you can't take any way more than that, because otherwise he doesn't have a purpose. These are all encompassing. It has to go in what's under the water. God designed men to lead, to physically carry the burdens and cares of their family, community, and the less fortunate. Men were created to make decisions based on fact, not emotion. This sometimes is referred to as cognitive empathy. One of those strange science words that they use now. Cognitive empathy is the ability to analyze a problem or a situation without being overwhelmed by emotions and thoughts. Separating the facts from the emotion allows a man to act in the best interest of those affected, even if it requires him to sacrifice his well-being. That's the core of a man's purpose. So we've just discussed a man's purpose. Now we're going to discuss the responsibility that goes with a man's purpose. Hope by now you're realizing men are really deep. I mean, really deep. And this doesn't come up to the surface. By the time it comes up to the surface, the decision has made, what they're doing is already worked out. And if you ask them how they came up with this, including me, I won't be able to tell you. Because I've already done all the calculations, all the simulations, everything. I've looked at it all from the different angles. And I've said, this is what I have to do. I just go like this, start throwing things away. It's not that I didn't think about it, but I see this as the best possible solution. Now, I may be wrong, and that's where the woman comes in as the assistant, the helper, maybe to guide me in a different direction. But in the end, I have to be responsible for the decision that's made. Ask any woman when she says she wants to go out to eat and you ask her where she wants to go. Anywhere you want, dear. And then you say a place. Well, I'm not really hungry for that. Then by the third time, you're like, well, then we're not going. And she's getting upset with you. And most men, once they get older, they realize, I'm making a decision, I'll set it out, and this is what we'll do, and she will come. And that's all the woman wants, in most cases, is a confident man to lead her. You can disagree with that if you want. All right. So let's take a man and go from a man to a good man. What makes a good man? I was recently asked by a woman, what are the characteristics of a good man? You would think what we've gone through would be the characteristics of a good man. No, that's just a man. And she wanted to know why her parents didn't teach her what good men were. I admit this question disturbed me, but not because of who asked the question, but because it seemed so obvious to me. Why was it obvious to me? I'm a man. Who is better to know a good man from a bad man from an ugly man than a man? It used to be fathers watched over their daughters and told them who the good men were. That's why they would have to bring their dates into the house so the man could observe them. The father could observe them. Even nowadays, if you go to the garage, you usually want to send a man because that's a male-populated world, and a male can discern much quicker if the garage is treating you fairly. Not because we know any more than they know, any more than our wife or mother or whatever knows any more about the mechanics. But there's a sense in us, because we're both men, we can tell if they're being fair, truthful with us. So, think of this as, let's see, make sure I'm not, think of this responsibility as good men. All right? So what makes a man a good man? A good man is more than just having a purpose. There's a lot of men out there that have purposes, but it doesn't mean it's good. So what 3 things will good men have? I know, I'm getting way down there now. And you haven't even thought this out at all. You just want to be told that's a good man and you're good. Other good men can tell a good man if that other man that they're looking at has, number 1, priorities. Good men have priorities. They have goals, tasks, values in order of importance or emergency. A good man's priorities are the single most important thing that consume his time and a good man will constantly reevaluate and reorder his priorities so he does not become overwhelmed and his focus is not diluted or distracted by things of less importance or value. A good man always prioritizes others' needs above his unless their needs compromise what? Values? Yes. It's also peace. If his peace is compromised, then that's no longer a priority. So sometimes when you try to force a man to do something, what was a priority becomes no longer a priority because his peace has just been destroyed. And he's going to go away from that because he doesn't, man, although it looks like we love chaos, we like fixing chaos. We don't like living in it because there's no rules. Second thing, a good man has boundaries. If you show me a good man, he better have boundaries because if he doesn't have boundaries, then his priorities are going to be all over the place. Boundaries are limits and rules set for relationships, behaviors, communications, and demands that also don't compromise his peace. We're going to keep repeating this peace thing. A good man's boundaries define where his well-being ends and others' well-being begins. Keep that in mind. A good man protects his emotional security so that he can fulfill his purpose. There's a lot more to that, but we're limited. What's the third and last thing a good man has? Men should know this. It's usually the first thing brought up when there's a criticism of a man. Discipline. Now, I was told by my sons that if you have the first 2, you have the third. And I said that's not necessarily true. Because we can have lots of priorities and we can have boundaries, but if we have no discipline, it doesn't matter. So here's our boundary, here's our priorities. Our discipline's not there, so we go over here. Well, we're outside the boundary. We go back here. Well, we're no longer on the priority list. That's the ability to control behavior, emotions, and desires in order to achieve priorities that fulfill his purpose. A man can't fulfill his purpose if he doesn't have discipline. A good man will choose what needs to be done over what he wants to do in the moment. Okay, so we've talked about a good man. There was another man I had mentioned. Does anybody remember what that man was? Godly man. A good man is not necessarily a godly man. Just like a man is not necessarily a good man. Now, all the men in here instinctively know this, but it's confusing to everybody else. In part because men never talk about this. And why would we? We just do it because it's in us. We're encoded. But a good man actually has to do something to become a good man. A godly man has to do more than a good man. So what is a godly man? Can anybody give me a 4 or 5 word description? Yes. I'm going to read to you the one that hits me. A good man is a man after God's own heart. Godly men are after God's own heart. All that entails. A godly man will prostrate himself before God and continue to strive with the Lord in everything that he does. And that's everything. That's how a godly man will do this at work, will do it at home, will do it with his wife or his girlfriend, will do it with his children. He's always doing everything for them according to God's will. That's a godly man. And that is a huge task. What men do is they process this every single day. Everything they do, they go through the process. You just don't see it because we never talk about it. Because what's the point of talking about it when it's the right thing to do? So what are the characteristics of a godly man? I have 7 here. There could be more, but I have 7. Give me the first characteristics of a godly man. Now, my son's got at least 2 of them when I ask him. Number 1 is godly men are loyal. Now, when we talk about these characteristics, they're not necessarily what women may think they are. Because in this day and age, we've all been corrupted by societal issues, let's put it that way. Loyalty means steadfast faithfulness, dedication and support for another, even when he must sacrifice himself for the good of another. That's loyal. What's another one? A godly man is generous. Good men don't have to be generous. They're just good. Godly men are generous. They don't expect to be compensated or repaid for their generosity. A good man might. Godly men are what? You get one. They are full of humility. They admit their mistakes, not only to themselves, but they also admit their mistakes to those who they are responsible for. Because the worst thing a godly man can do is make a mistake and not let those people who are watching and depending on him know he made that mistake. Because he is no longer being a teacher, he is no longer being an example. He may have corrected it, but he's left it out there so that they can mimic it later, even if they don't know they're mimicking it. There's another one. We got 3 so far. Kind. A godly man is kind. And I've seen the difference between a good man and a godly man. A good man doesn't have to be kind, he just has to be right. A godly man treats others better than he believes they deserve to be treated. To the point he no longer thinks of them deserving. He just treats them better because they're children of God. That starts to separate good men from godly men. Godly men are patient. I know you all can see this. You've seen a good man, you see a godly man. A good man is not always patient. Something flips them out. They get upset. Something doesn't go right. Their peace is disturbed. They've lost patience. Godly man will be patient with those people who repeatedly make the same mistakes. And he's patient because he knows they're trying. A good man might just give up. A godly man has honor. He's doing what is right in the sight of God, regardless of the consequences. That's honor. And the last one. What's the last one a godly man has as a characteristic? What's that? Understanding, loving. What's that? Kindness. This is one that's overlooked. But actually, he wears it on his head and his hands. Forgiveness. He forgives even when others say those people don't deserve forgiveness. That is a godly man. A godly man knows that he is a servant first and a leader second. A good man who's a godly man is also a servant leader. A servant leader is a leader who serves others by prioritizing their growth, well-being, and success, especially for those who he's responsible for. So a godly man, remember this, is a servant leader. Name me one servant leader from the Bible. The most important servant leader from the Bible. Jesus. They were all good ones. And they would all be considered godly men. But you always need to look for the best example possible, because that's the one you're probably going to mimic, even when you're not trying. Good men are not destined to be godly men. Good men can only become godly men if they empty themselves of self and replace self with Christ's love. Good men must pass through fire to be cleansed of their sin and submit themselves to the Lord's will before they will be made godly men. Jesus Christ was an example of a servant leader, but not in the way of we think of leaders nowadays. Now comes the fun part. So we've gone way down that deep list of what a man is. Now these are only surface. I could spend hours on each one discussing the topic with anybody who wanted it about men. But it's only because I spent hours trying to understand myself. Luckily, I have some time. And I always have to do something because I always have to have a purpose. So if I'm riding on the lawnmower, I'm not only just thinking about cutting the grass and cutting nicely around that piece and so forth. When I'm on the straightaway and there's nothing in my way, I'm thinking about, why did I do that? Why am I doing this? And why was she so upset with me? And I'm saying, I can't fix her, so then I got to figure out what I need to look at to improve the situation. So how many women in here know what a godly man needs from a woman? Support is on that list. Those others are on the list, but we're talking about what men need from a woman that they're going to marry or date. So I'm going to go over these. And you've heard some of them before, or you've heard them said differently. Because we've already talked about godly men, so all that's incorporated into it, but this is more specific. Godly men need from a woman loyalty. She will stand by his side at times of trouble and tribulation and trust that he will act in the best interest of the long-term success of his marriage and family. That was a lot to chew on. That's what men need from their significant other. Godly men also need from a woman something called solace. You know what that is? That's space and peace combined. All right? They need a place where they're left alone to figure things out, undisturbed. Not because they don't want to be with the woman, it's because they have to think, and if somebody's interrupting your thinking process, they don't have peace. So they don't think. And sometimes if they don't get that peace, they start saying really stupid things out loud. Normally it starts in their head, but eventually it comes out the mouth. And then they have no reason why they said it other than their peace was disturbed. And you can't tell your girlfriend or your wife, you disturbed my peace, so I said something stupid. Because in general, women are not made that way. And men know this. So at the same time their peace is being disturbed, they are thinking so deeply, you may say they're not paying attention to me. They're not listening to me. But they're processing it all. When I was younger, this would happen. And I processed so hard I'd fall asleep every time on my wife when she was talking to me. You know, that's really bad. And I didn't understand why. It's because I was thinking so hard on the right thing to do, how to solve it, how to fix it, that I was just drained of all emotion and energy. Then I was out. Third thing, a woman needs to nurture a godly man. We are lacking a lot of that today because we've become a self-centered society. Some of the greatest men are because the women that they married nurtured them. So let's be clear on what this nurturing is. If you nurture a man, you help maintain his self-esteem, which is important, and you encourage him to move forward and to focus upward. You remind him that not all his burdens are his alone. And here's something you should keep in mind. You may not want to be his mother, and he may not want to be your father, but you both have the same characteristics that will help you grow. So yes, men like to have their mothers because their mother pushed them forward by being nurturing. And women like to have their fathers because fathers will be strong, protectful, careful with them, but will also be honest. Fourth thing, and we had mentioned support. A woman can lift up her man when the burden gets too heavy for him. That doesn't mean she's taking the burden, but she's lifting it up. She's trying to take some of that burden from him without actually taking it from him. It's standing next to him. Take on the task where he needs help and you are equipped to perform. Don't take on a task that you're not equipped to perform or do. Don't do that. He will lose disrespect for you in an instant. You say, I'll do it, I'll take care of it, and then you never do it. Or you come up with some reason for not doing it. Or you finally say, I didn't want to do it to begin with. You've disrespected him, and he's lost his trust in you. Remember, well, you need to know this. Men do not marry a carbon copy of themselves. We marry or date somebody who we think is complementary to us. Men know where our weaknesses are, even if we ever tell you that. We need somebody who will help us with our weaknesses, and we have agreed to help you with your weaknesses, if you let us. In most cases, men will let you help with their weaknesses, but sometimes they may be too ashamed, and that's where you have to nurture them. So these go together. Here's the one that most people always say is the number one priority. Men need physical affection. That is very true. It's how we connect on the emotional level. But that physical affection could be somebody coming up from behind them and touching their shoulders. It could be somebody just stroking their hair. You know what that does to a man? It boosts their energy immediately. They could be depressed. They could be angry, upset. But suddenly their brain says, somebody cares about me. And that stuff fades into the background. That also may recharge that man for days, just that one act. Because suddenly they have a purpose again. And the purpose is to protect and provide for that woman. It reminds them. The sixth one. This is a controversial one. Can anybody tell me why it's controversial before I even say what it is? Submission. Men need women to surrender to them so that they can lead. You can't lead an unruly person, an unruly crowd if they don't submit to you. Man was designed by God to lead. People talk about co-leaders. The head of the household is a co-leader, a man and a woman. Think about this for an instance. If you have a co-leader of a head of a household, what happens when you both disagree on doing something? It doesn't get done, it gets done wrong, or loyalty and trust is betrayed. In the real world out there, in business, if you have a co-leader of a business, how long does that last? It's usually done within the first 5 years. Because somebody has to make the tough decision. Somebody has to lead. So either the co-leader, one drops back and this becomes the leader, or they go their separate ways. You can look in the Bible and it talks about submitting. If you can't submit, then he can't lead. And if he can't lead, he doesn't have a purpose. The last one, and my sons argued with me over this one. I said team player. Why do you think I said team player? Because they said, oh, this already covers team player. Raise your hand if you think marriage should be equal amongst men and women. What happens on that day that one of you only has 30% of the energy? You've had a rotten day, it's been rough, or you're sick. In an equal marriage, that means the other person only has to give 30% too. What happens to the other 40%? Who cares? We don't care if it falls apart. No marriage is truly equal 50-50. Some marriages, it'll switch from day to day. Maybe the man is having a great day and he can pick up the slack for the woman. Or maybe the woman's had a so-so day, but she can pick up for the slack for the man because he had a rotten day. A complete marriage is when they adjust their equality so that it's 100%. Unfortunately, we don't teach this at all anymore. And people go into these things, young men and women go into these things thinking it's going to be equal. Well, if you're in a marriage long enough, you realize that is a big lie that the devil told you. And sometimes, one spouse is doing more of the work most of the time. You could say those aren't equal marriages. But if it's from the man's perspective, he bought into this, and he's accepted this. And God requires him to accept what he's bought into. So that was down here when we were talking about the oneness. Does anybody remember that verse? Where the two shall become one, and then also let no man tear asunder. It says one. It doesn't say equal. It says one. And how you remain one is that you adjust so that you remain one. God designed that. And I mentioned this. When men decide to marry, they choose the whole package, the good, the bad, and the ugly. A man accepts a woman as is, no returns. Or at least that's what it used to be up until 20 years ago. The man, you want to cover your ears on this, women. The men know the woman he has chosen is flawed. He may not know how flawed she is, but he knows that she's flawed. He has weighed the pros and cons and has determined that the good significantly outweighs her bad or ugly. Knowing this, the man chooses not to change his wife, but instead to grow with her. That's key. He chooses to grow with her. He doesn't expect her to be perfect. He doesn't expect her to change. He expects to grow with her. Finally, so we've gone through all these, and this is just scratching the surface. Women, you need to know that there are 5 spiritual growth stages for men. And they're rather simple, because we are simple. The boy, number 1. The young man, number 2. Marriage, yes, that's a stage. Number 4, children, yes, that's a stage. I can tell you, I've gone through it. And then the last one is the man, where he is a sage. He's a wise man. Because he's completed the other 4. God's design since the fall was and is for men to become complete whole again. When men finally achieve adulthood, That's when they are, men. And by the way, men decide if you're a man. No one else decides it. You don't decide you're a man. Other men decide if you're a man. That's how we know good men from bad men and ugly men. Okay. When men finally achieve adulthood, they will have a more complete understanding of their Father and their Holy Father. Passing through the cleansing fires of marriage and having children makes the boy into a man. This is God's plan. It's not my plan. And it's called out in the Bible. And it starts in Genesis. Good men accept this, and with grace change into godly men. Don't be fooled into thinking that we have said everything here, because it's impossible to say everything here when it's just a one-way dialogue. Because there's millions of questions you have. And you're not going to get the answers if you don't study it. And so that's why you need to study at least these. And the Holy Spirit will be with you, and it will give you more verses to study. Let's see. Yeah. Lost my place here. So when you're looking at this, something I didn't mention, but I want to finish with here is, if I can remember it. Yeah, there it is. Remember that Adam gave his rib to Eve. Eve gave Adam an apple before she gave him children. However, God gave them both life and forgave them for their disobedience. Sometimes things are just not fair, and we should praise God for that. To help you understand this a little bit better, I've asked Robin to read a story that goes along with this.
The Secret to Understanding Men. Mark sat in his dimly lit garage, the frantic sobs of his wife Sarah echoing from the house. Mark had discussed Sarah's affair and confronted his wife. Paralyzed by guilt and remorse, she confessed her infidelity and agreed to end the affair completely. Mark stared at his phone, taking deep breaths. The discovery had broken him. His initial instinct was to pack his bags and expose Sarah's betrayal to everyone. For weeks, he had wandered the house in a silent daze, avoiding his wife and children, torn between righteous anger and absolute heartbreak. He reasoned that he had every right to leave. Yet as he watched his children laughing at the dining room table one evening, his anger shifted into a quiet, suffocating numbness. He knew that he could not bring himself to shatter their world or taint their memories of their mother. That evening, he told his wife that he forgave her, but only for the sake of their children. Sarah, deeply remorseful and terrified of losing her family, devoted herself entirely to earning back his love and proving her commitment. She dedicated herself to rebuilding the marriage and worked hard at being the wife that she thought Mark wanted. She worked tirelessly, erasing her infidelity, but the coldness she felt from Mark at times was just too unbearable. In frustration or anger, she would lash out at Mark for his unforgiving attitude. If that wasn't satisfactory enough, she would share her feelings of loneliness and abandonment with their children. Although Mark still had feelings for Sarah and loved his children dearly, He struggled with completely forgiving Sarah for her betrayal. This strained their already tenuous relationship and made Mark appear to be demanding, angry, and emotionless toward her and the children. His children resented the treatment of their mother by their dad and the change toward them when they talked about their mom with their dad. In time, Mark was able to fully forgive Sarah and rebuild marriage better than what it was before, but this was not until after the children had grown and moved out. Their children, now young adults, suspected that their father had or was having an affair and that their mother had forgiven him because she relied on his income and protection. They tried in earnest to get their mother to leave Mark, but Sarah refused, saying that she would explain one day. However, Sarah knew that she would never tell her children because she was too ashamed of what she had done, and she did not want to see the look on their face or the hurt that it would cause Mark all over again. This was one secret she would have to keep forever, and one that she knew Mark would not share without her consent. With time, Sarah's infidelity became only vague memories to Mark, and when she had time to think about what happened, he considered the matter of more a blessing now that he loved Sarah more deeply than he ever thought was possible, and believed that his wife also loved him even more than he loved her. His only regret, the only pain remaining from that time, was that his children no longer loved or respected him like they once did. After Mark retired, he developed heart problems and one day ended up in intensive care. Sarah was at his side, holding his hand, praying for him, hoping the Lord wouldn't take him away just yet. She asked her children to visit him in the hospital, but over the years their resentment grew towards their father for how he had treated their mother. Sarah pleaded with them, and in the end, they relented, and she asked them to visit their dad. The visit to the hospital by their children was cold and clinical. Sarah could hear in their voices that they wished their father would just die so that their mother could be free of his infidelity and betrayal. That night, Sarah confronted her children about their treatment of their father. To her amazement, they accused him of infidelity and making her life miserable. Something spoke to Sarah when she heard their righteous anger and indignation about their dad. She and Mark had rebuilt their marriage only because Mark forgave her and because he was a patient man. She had become a better mother only because Mark had encouraged her and supported her. She had become a better woman only because Mark was a good man. Everything she had done or become was because Mark was a godly man. She understood that now. She did not grieve the Holy Spirit anymore. Instead, she asked God for her life and accepted Jesus Christ as her Savior and Redeemer. It was then that Sarah's heart melted, and she finally told the whole truth about her infidelity to her children. With tears streaming down her face, she confessed what she had done, how she had hurt their father. She asked for their forgiveness for her infidelity and for letting them believe the lie that their father was the one who committed adultery. After her children forgave her, she asked them to visit their father and apologize for their behavior toward him. Early the next morning, the children visited their father in the hospital with Sarah by their side and apologized to their dad. Sarah then told Mark that it was her fault because she let the children believe a lie because she did not want her children to know that she had committed adultery. With the secret now exposed in the light of day, Sarah felt the burden lift from her chest, and the weight that Mark carried all those years was now completely gone. Sins forgiven in secret remain a burden by their holders and are passed on unbeknownst from generation to generation. Mark and Sarah learned that forgiveness is not always about erasing the past, but about making daily, deliberate sacrifices to preserve the future and for you and your loved ones as well as others.